would Superman be like if he were more serious, more human, and amnesiac, or a villain? Don't worry, there are so many characters created to be just like him. We have pretty much the answer to all what-if questions surrounding the last son of Krypton. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It's me, Amanda. Superman was such a huge success, it's not surprising there are so many imitation characters in existence. Who is your favorite character unashamedly inspired by the Man of Steel? Number 10. Plutonian. The Plutonian hails from the Mark Waid series Irredeemable and its spin-off series Incorruptible, both published by Boom Studios. In this series, we get to imagine what a Superman character would be like if he wasn't driven by hope and kindness, but instead driven by a sense of entitlement and rage? Daniel Hartigan was once a hero who did his best to earn the respect and love of the people of Earth, but has turned hard over the years, in part by the loss he himself has suffered, but also by the fact that he feels in essence betrayed by humanity, who he sees as lesser than him, and who he grows to despise for critiquing his failings. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, wait! Hold on a second! Are you subscribed yet? Because I think many of you are not, so you should click that subscribe button now, or else something bad will happen. Or maybe not, but you'll feel better if you click it, I promise. Yeah, see, don't you feel better now? Number 9. Samaritan. Samaritan is like a less fun, more stoic Superman. I mean, even his name sounds more stoic, Samaritan. He's a hero in the Astro City series. This series started out with Image, got passed around a bunch to other publishers, including DC themselves with their now defunct line Vertigo, before returning home to Image once more, recently, in 2022, as a matter of fact. Instead of being an alien from another world, Samaritan is a no-nonsense time traveler, whose power set and appearance echo Kal-El's, despite having a very different personality. Number 8. Miracleman. Miracleman. Oh boy. Miracleman started as more of a Superman mimic for sure, but how he has evolved as a character since then. He was originally known as Marvel Man, and was a superhero who hailed from L. Miller and Son Limited's comics. This was back in the 1950s, and they definitely got some inspiration from the Superman trope for sure. Although really this is a character inspired by another likely Superman-inspired creation, Captain Marvel. At least a lot of people tend to draw parallels between Supes and Captain Marvel, who we now know as Shazam, and honestly, there's a lot of stuff to base that off of, but maybe we'll talk about that later. In the late 1980s, Marvel Man was rebooted by Alan Moore and given a much more darker origin, especially in relation to one of his family members and his story, Kid Miracleman, aka Johnny Bates. After much legal proceedings in regards to who actually owned the rights to Miracleman, Marvel ended up acquiring them and getting Neil Gaiman to return to conclude that story that he had written for the character back in the late 80s and the early 90s, following Moore's time writing for the character. And that actually also all spun out of a whole legal proceeding that Neil Gaiman was doing with Todd McFarlane, and then Marvel was just like swooped in and bought those rights. But they were like, hey Neil, you can come write it. Number 7. Sentry. Sentry himself is like Superman, but if you made him really depressing. Well, maybe not quite as depressing as Miracleman can be at times, but yes. Sentry is like Marvel's Superman. In fact, I'd argue he is one of the most iconic of their Superman-esque characters. This is probably true because his story is quite different from the original Kal-El, which is what makes him stand out a lot more. He's got actually a really good story. Bob Reynolds was not an alien, but instead was an addict desperate for a hit. So he broke into a lab and ended up stumbling upon and consuming the Golden Sentry formula. What is the Golden Sentry formula? That formula was actually made in an attempt to recreate the super soldier serum, but also make it thousands of times more powerful, because why wouldn't you do that? As it stands, when Bob became Sentry, it is said that he had the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. That's like Superman times 1,000,000 and exploding, I guess. Sentry also is known for his darker reflection, the Void, which initially was believed to be the result of a dissociative identity disorder, which we later learned was actually created by the villain Mastermind, who made Sentry believe that basically the Sentry couldn't exist without the Void also existing. For a while, the world forgot Sentry, us readers included, until he was retconned into existence in the early 2000s. But you know, retcon isn't like, he's always been around, you just forgot. Recently, Sentry was torn asunder in King in Black. Karma really for all the people Sentry is torn in half himself. That is a thing he does a lot. He died and was taken to Valhalla by Valkyrie Jane Foster, but now he's kind of back back as a zombie with his body supposedly possessed by 100 million crazed ghosties or something like that. Comics. 100 million seems to be a number that Sentry just like, you know, he's always 100 million something. Number 6, Gladiator. Gladiator belongs to an alien race, which is where he gets his powers from. His given name is Calark, and he is from Stronia. As a Stronian, he has certain powers thanks to his alien physiology, but he was also enhanced to become a gladiator, and was one of the few who proved themselves worthy enough to earn a place on the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. His power set is quite similar to Superman's, and includes super speed, strength, heat vision, super hearing, a healing factor, strong psychic defense, and even a kind of Bizarro-esque power, frost breath. Gladiator can also travel without protection in the vacuum of space like Superman can. However, where he is somewhat unique is in how his powers work. Gladiator's base is pretty powerful, but he actually has the potential to even surpass the power levels of someone like Superman, if he is confident enough. See, the more he believes in himself, the more powerful he becomes. Number 5, Icon. Now, you may have noticed, I'm not really using the term knockoff when I'm talking about these heroes on this list, despite the fact that that is the title for the video, and that's because while they're definitely startlingly similar to Superman, I think a lot of them bring something new to the table. Icon himself is from Milestone Media, but at the same time DC Comics was kind of the one working with Milestone in distribution, and even recently both incorporated some of Milestone's characters into their continuity and then later revived Milestone, giving their heroes a reboot and their own line. Icon himself is similar to Superman in the sense that they are both insanely powerful aliens from another world. But while Superman was quick to step up to the plate and become a hero, Augustus Freeman eventually became a recluse who had to be drawn out into the light and convinced to become a hero, which is where his spunky sidekick Rocket came in, who not only motivated Freeman to become the hero Icon, but also persuaded him to let her join him, despite her not possessing powers of her own. How cool is that? Honestly, I think Icon's like a cooler Superman. He also just has a cool story where like he landed and then, you know, because of the way he was found, that shaped who he became as a humanoid figure. So neat. Number 4, Captain Marvel. I mean, we can't have a list where we discuss characters seemingly inspired by, or who somehow just so happen to resemble Superman, without talking about one of the most famous among them. That's right, we're talking about Captain Marvel, or as he's known now, Shazam. Still, I'm sticking with his classic name for the title at this point because that's how we knew him originally in the comics when we first were introduced to this character. Captain Marvel appeared shortly after Superman hit the scene, making his debut in 1939 in Fawcett Comics. Although he's with DC now, back then, he was not. Famously, DC Comics sued Fawcett Comics for copyright infringement in 1941, after things came to a boiling point between the two companies, with DC, or National Comics Publications as they were known at the time, believing that Captain Marvel was just another copycat superhero of their own Superman. Well, you might know that DC lost this trial, which also went on for like 12 years. This is a really long trial. What you might not know is that the court actually agreed with DC, confirming that yes, Captain Marvel seemed to be a copy of Superman himself. However, because of a technicality where the copyright symbol was not placed on all of the Superman comic strips from National Comics, they lost the case, as it was determined that National Comics actually therefore had no copyright to sue over. Gotta make sure you put those symbols. Number 3, Apollo. Originally from Jim Lee's own company, Wildstorm Production, Wildstorm and Apollo have since been bought by DC, where Wildstorm first became an imprint before being blended in with the main continuity and line. Apollo himself is super similar to Superman, despite having completely different physical appearances and primary colors. Apollo 2 is a superhero who gets his power from the sun. Like Superman, he also has a sigil on his chest, though this represents not his house, but, you know, the sun itself, which as we said, gives him his power. So it makes sense. Apollo's power set includes many powers that are similar to Superman's as well, such as flight, super strength, heat vision, and durability. Apollo himself is immortal, but in addition to everything else, he has also been known to demonstrate the ability to manipulate matter on a molecular level, which is kind of different. Apollo is also married to Midnighter. Together they are like the sun and the moon, and allow shippers of Superman and Batman a glimpse into what that relationship might actually look like if the two were gay and attracted to one another and then ended up getting married. So for shippers of Supes and Bats, this might be a character for you. Number 2, Hyperion. I mean, this is literally a ripoff of Superman. That's kind of the whole point of the character though. He is meant to provide a commentary on Superman, which is why he exists as he does. The whole point of him is really his similarity and also his subtle differences to supes. Hyperion hails from Marvel Comics and is often part of a team called the Squadron Supreme, or depending on the version that we're talking about, sometimes even the Squadron Supreme of America. Now, I don't know about you, but to me that definitely feels very similar to the Justice League, or the Justice League of America. Hyperion is known as Marcus Milton. Typically, his origin is that he was an alien who was sent to Earth as a baby, even more familiar, and not only that, but Hyperion, who can fly, is super strong and super durable, was also apparently the last known survivor of an eternal alien race whose planet died. I mean, come on! This has Superman written all over it. He became one of his Earth's premier superheroes and ended up joining the Squadron Supreme. At least, you know, that's one of his main origin stories. There's a few different versions of Hyperion throughout Marvel Comics. Number 1. Homelander. Talk about commentaries on Superman. Homelander is also definitely that, but a much more crass commentary. This version of Superman is not really a hero, but instead is poised in Garth Ennis's comic series The Boys as the main antagonist. Although in reality, there are some bigger bads than him really, but still, in general, he is known to be one of the most vile and most powerful of the supes in the comic. The Boys imagines a harsh, brutal world that offers what it suggests is a more realistic take on what superpowered humans would be like, basically the actual worst. These heroes pretend to save the day, putting on big smiles, while really many of them are addicts, murderers, and often worse criminals than those they fight against, because they have superpowers. Homelander can fly, is invulnerable, insanely strong and fast, and has his own version of heat vision. He is also the leader of the Seven, the premier superhero team from Vought, the company that created superheroes and also works to make money off their brands, marketing them as being saviors and profiting for it, while covering up all the awful things they do to preserve and of course safeguard those profits. Because that's what it would be like if we had superheroes and they were brands in real life. I love talking about characters, their history outside of the panels, and their connection to those who have come before and inspired them. So thank you so much for watching and helping me to be able to do what I love. You stay nerdy, YouTube. Bye!